All right, folks. Welcome to Nino's Corner. I'm with the great David Wilcock. And I got to tell you, folks, I love shows like this because I get to ask the questions like a kid, like I'm in elementary school. I'm just so curious about everything, and I really feel like this guy has a lot of answers. At least he puts the pieces of the puzzle together for me quite well, and I know he does for my audience as well. David, thank you so much for joining me. It's always an honor, and thank you for joining the General's tent for being the general in the General's tent. People loved it. You knocked it out of the park. And I'm putting that up on Rumble pretty damn soon.
Well, I'm really happy to be there for you, and you respect me, and that's a very important thing. And I
All right.
like your curiosity. It's just a shame that we didn't get to talk more because you had all these incredible fans who wanted to speak to me, but that's why we're back again a week later. Let's hit it out of the park, brother.
Let's knock it out. All right, folks, here we go. Now, I guess I'm going to start with this. During my awakening, I believe there's other life forms out there, right? I have one foot in the simulation theory. I have one foot in um aliens, extraterrestrials, outer space. I got a little bit on, is the earth flat? Is it obtuse? Is it fully sphere? I got all these questions swirling around in my head because I have all kinds of different guests on my show. So I feel like everything just keeps taking me back to the Bible. Okay. It keeps bringing me right back to the Bible. And I think you agree with that. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
some of the earliest texts. I would love to know what the Vatican's hiding from everybody, but let's kind of incorporate that for my audience. I have a big Christian audience. What are these beings, Dave? I mean, what are they? Are they interdimensional? Are they uh, are they within our solar system? Are they in our galaxy? Are they outer planetary, interplanetary? What are these beings?
Right.
How did they get here? Are they fallen angels? Are some of them good? Are some of them bad? What are we looking at
Sure.
here? What are these things? First and
Well,
foremost.
the typical newbie to UFOs is only going to be thinking about grays, which would be historically from the Betty and Barney Hill contactee case. They're supposedly from Zeta Reticuli. They have large black eyes. They have white heads. They're bald and very much larger than ours, and they're spindly little bodies. And there's a long-standing train of thought on that front that could be a fetus type of proportion that's grown to adulthood. That's called a neonate. Because if you look at a fetus, it has these large eyes, it has a bald head, larger head than the body, spindly little body. So that could be part of what that is. And that would imply that they are some type of cloned technology. So to answer the question, double click on it, we got to go beyond grays. We got to go beyond Zeta Reticuli. We got to go beyond classical ufology of the Whitley-Strieber, communion type of thing. And we have to understand that we are dealing with a whole range of different beings. I went to the Disclosure Project event in 2001, Washington, D.C. I was there on May 10th. This was where 39 different whistleblowers came forward under Dr. Stephen Greer. And there was one guy there named Sergeant Clifford Stone, who was incredibly believable. In fact, he was the only one in the briefing that I was at, which was for VIPs and members of Congress. And it was amazing to be in that room because he starts crying in the middle of sharing his testimony, and he got a standing ovation. And there didn't appear to be anybody in the room who disbelieved him, and this was some very high-ranking people in there. So what he said was that there were UFO crashes and that he had a cover story in the military, but that occasionally he would do these crash retrieval jobs where he would go and visit a UFO crash. And then in the process of doing that, he would have to have a telepathic interface with any living victims that were inside. And the reason he started crying is that he was remembering feeling as vividly his own leg getting blown off as if it was the being whose leg had been blown off in the crash. So he actually cried on stage.
He was feeling what they were feeling.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like
he has
E.T.,
a bunch of really weird stories, man.
like E.T., the movie
Yeah,
E.T.,
I mean,
with
if
the kids feeling what the aliens feeling.
I don't know if you're quite as old as I am, but if you remember that movie about ETs, and at the end of the they're trying to get them back to their ship, and at the end of the movie, the ship comes back and it's a big metallic looking sphere,
Yes.
and they all look like kids with bald heads and big eyes. That was based on Sergeant Clifford Stone's testimony. That movie was actually.
Wow.
I
So
forget
I'm
what the movie's
on.
called, but it's an amazing film. And anyway, yeah, he had a telepathic interface with them, and we've had the military-industrial complex has quarantined this whole thing from the president, starting with Eisenhower. That's why he warned about the military-industrial complex at the end of his term. And nobody's going to tell the president anything. That the cosmic top secret, and I have multiple people who I've been able to speak with personally who have cosmic clearance. That's 35 levels of need to know above the president of the United States. And so
Incredible.
Sergeant Clifford Stone had a guy whose cover title was that he was a naval admiral. That's the highest rank in the Navy that you can get. And this guy showed him a field manual of the 57 most commonly seen UFO entities that are operating right in our airspace that could crash on Earth. There's 57 of them, and like the ketchup, they call them the Heinz 57. And so within that group of 57, you have pictures of their faces, pictures of their ships, pictures of various threat profiles that they might have encountered in the past. And the idea here is that, contrary to most people's expectations, there are a few grays in there. Yes, there's a few types that look like that, but the majority of the ETs operating in our airspace look like human beings. But there can be some sharp divergence. They can have very pale white skin. They could have any of the pastel colors of the rainbow: yellow, blue, green, orange, pink, kind of a reddish color. There's types of humans that look a lot like us, but they have irises that are violet, and it's actually not a round pupil. It's almost more like a diamond, like you see in playing cards. Then you have a whole category of reptilians. There's 3 major types of reptilians. There's yellow ones, green and brown, and then there's a grayish color. Those are the real ones that I've been briefed on by multiple people. We also have insectoid types. There's at least 2 insectoid types. There's mantis types that they also colloquially called crickets. There's also the ant people types that was reported in the Hopi legends.
Yeah, and they put those on the cliff dwellings, correct? They're painted
Darn
all
right.
over. Right. And so let me ask you this. So my mind goes back before we go any further in this part. I think of Charles Hall, who talks about the tall whites. I think about Billy
Exactly.
Meyer, who talks about the Pleiadians. But then I think about Aleister Crowley, who believes he summoned entity that resembled a gray alien. So to me, Aleister Crowley, who was like the founder of like the modern day, one of the most modern founders of what we call what Satanism today,
Ritual magic.
right? He summoned, or he brought forth an entity that he called Lamb, I believe it was, and it was a
The
gray
first name that he got was 𝗬𝗧, and then the name that he got by 1917 was 𝗬𝗏. Yes, that's
Lam.
correct.
Okay, so all right, so that makes me believe they're demonic entities because of Aleister Crowley. That's where my mind goes with this, or the Nephilim. Could they be
Sure.
from other dimensions, and they're not really from other planets or other solar systems?
Well, I had known about the 𝗏 thing for many years. In fact, the first conference I ever did, there was a guy there named Ed, and he was from Alabama, and he had a really funny Southern accent. And he comes out of this first conference I ever did in Chicago. It was like in 2000. I did one before that in Tennessee, but the first one that I did that was really well advertised and people went to was in Chicago. And he comes out of the building and he goes, "Lam, Lam," and he's pointing at me. And I hadn't been famous before, so I wasn't used to this thing of like people just randomly walking up to you like they know who you are. It really freaked me out. I didn't even know what Lam was at that point. And he was making fun of my, my hairline that some people say goes all the way back to slavery, right? Well, I got to keep this stuff in the front here, keep it all looking good.
You look good,
Get the
Dave.
hairline under control,
You
So he's
look
calling
good,
me
I promise.
Lam, and I'm like, oh man, really? And when I found out what it was, I'm like, oh, dude. So I didn't really get to fit those pieces together until I had a briefing in 2021 where I found out that, okay, we got to go back to Jacques Vallée. We got to go back to his classic book, Passport to Magonia, where he says that, there's all these different names for what might be grays. And if you go back to ancient legends, you might hear them called fairies, gnomes, dwarves, elves, sylphs, little people, Seeligoth. There's all these different names for them. And yet the accounts are very similar, which is that when these beings would contact people, there would be some type of sexual, probably unwanted experience involved, and you get sent back. So it wasn't until 2021 that I found out from, essentially, we could say the Air Force side of disclosure, to put it in a very, very general term, that there is, in fact, an evil agenda with the reptilians, with the insectoids, and with most of the gray types probably would fit into this category, where Aleister Crowley was playing around with ritual magic. And this is technology, if you want to call it that, that allows you to create, if you do it properly, an evil portal in space and time, a rift in time and space that allows you to bring in entities that do not belong here in our reality. But there's some confusion there because, again, 𝗏 was this entity that looks like a gray, except the eyes were small, and they can hypnotically project images to you. Grays are often, people talk about they saw a 3-foot tall owl. Well, that's not an owl. These entities will almost always project some type of thought pattern to make them look different and to camouflage themselves so you don't see what they really look like. So 𝗏 probably projected eyes that were different than his big, buggy, black eyes to try to make Aleister Crowley a little more comfortable. That's probably what that was. But essentially, it's a gray. I mean, you look at the picture of 𝗏, it's like, oh my God, dude, wow.
So can we say that you don't need to make contact with these beings? All we really need is like a Ouija board. I mean, we just need to summon them with dark magic. I mean, that's how you make contact, and that would make me believe that they're demonic.
Sure, there are definitely demonic extraterrestrials. And it gets worse than that, because to finish the story real quick on that, Aleister Crowley was given updated information because he was part of this vast secret society. There's many secret societies. It's been called the Secret Combination. It's been called Moriah. There's other names that I won't say that everybody's more familiar with. And this has been around since the times of Babylon and Rome and Carthage. And the Romans invaded Carthage and got this technology, if you want to call it that, of how to create visual manifestations of demonic entities like Baal and Moloch. And this was through the live offering, the burnt offering, as it's called. You take an infant, you got a whole crowd there, you throw the infant on the fire, and all of a sudden now you can see this entity, or the entity will actually grab the infant out of your hands in some cases. And like they're usually taller than
something like that.
What's that?
Like the cremation of care, that type of ritual.
That's another example. Yeah, I mean, there you have it in the Bohemian situation, where they're doing something that's a very ancient rite. They've got a giant statue of an owl that they carved. And again, think about what I said, that the grays look like owls, right?
Yeah.
And so, these dots start connecting, don't they?
Yep.
So this is what happened. It turns out, when I talked to my top insiders, and you got to remember, Area 51 is real. There's bases like that all over the planet. They've had the Roswell crash, wreckage from that. They kept it secret after, during Eisenhower's, when it all went undercover. And so back again in 1911 and 1917 is when Aleister Crowley was regularly being contacted with in-person manifestations of a gray extraterrestrial that taught him how to properly do ritual magic. But then this is where it gets weird, is that when you do the ritual magic, you're not actually seeing grays most of the time, or reptilians most of the time. What you're seeing is a whole, it's like uncorking the bottle to a whole level of reality around the earth that we don't normally acknowledge exists, which is the so-called astral planes, the lower astral planes, or if you go back to Dante's Inferno, the 7 levels of hell. So it turns out that there are what most people would think of as demons, and these entities typically cannot live in our reality. Unlike extraterrestrials, if their ship crashes, they leave bodies behind. That's not going to happen with a demon. A demon doesn't die here and leave behind a body. A demon has to have very special circumstances that allow it to temporarily project into our reality. And even then, it may not be visible except to the people doing the ritual. If somebody were to look in on it from the outside, you might not see anything except telekinetic events taking place
or
where there's
possess
something
somebody.
invisible.
Or they can possess somebody, or like a skinwalker.
Exactly.
Correct?
Exactly. Well, skinwalker is another example. Yeah, that's where in the Native American traditions, you have to kill somebody who's important to you, typically your own child. And then these demons will actually possess you and take over your body. And we see very similar things. I think it's in almost all of the Gospels. It's definitely in Luke. It's definitely in Mark. They have in the New Testament a description of Jesus going down to this area where nobody wanted to walk through because there was in Luke it's one person, in Mark it's two people, but they are essentially shape-shifting into demonic creatures, attacking people and then cannibalizing them. And this apparently was something that used to happen out in the open, probably because of the Carthaginian Roman ceremonies they were doing. But after Jesus came and paid the ransom with his own blood and went through crucifixion and resurrection, he essentially banished the demons to hell, if you want to call the lower astrals hell, so that they can only get here in these very, very exotic circumstances. So one of the insiders was a cocaine dealer, supposedly. They had tags in all the cocaine. So that's what they would do, is if anybody's cocaine didn't have the tag in it, the chemical tag, they'd go looking for you so that they have the control of the business. And they said, oh, that's better because now it's pure and everybody gets the good stuff. That's not really true. They just want to make
What's his
money.
name? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the name that I call him by so we can refer to him is Bruce.
Okay.
And so Bruce gave me a lot of information. He was very, very aware of this ritual magic. And he said it's actually extremely difficult to get these demons to actually project into our reality and show up. In the old days, you have alchemists and astrologers, and they would summon the golem, right? Which is where the thing from Lord of the Rings comes from. My precious, that's based on a demon. If you want to think about what a demon is like, watch Gollum in Lord of the Rings. That's a pretty good analogy. So what happens is that these entities require, for example, astronomical alignments. You can't get them to show up on a typical day. There are certain sacred satanic days of the year, sacred for them, where there's alignments in the planets, alignments in the sun and the moon and the stars, and where we are relative to other stars. And then there's certain portals between us and, like, for example, the belt stars of Orion. There's a portal down in December where that opens up when we're in a perfect alignment with the belt of Orion. And these entities actually do require what you could think of as a Stargate or wormhole technology to enter into our reality. They can't just show up whenever they want. And then you also...
Is this why they have rituals and they try to have try to have a birthday on a certain day, or a death on a certain day, or a tragic or chaos on a certain day, because they're going by a completely different occult calendar, correct? Not the
That's right.
I mean, it doesn't really match up to the Gregorian calendar, but they go by these certain days, and birthdays are very important to them on certain days, as well as war in certain parts of the month and things like that, correct? This is all to pay homage to the entities that they serve, right?
Right. It's not even just paying homage. It's the fact that these entities require what we could think of as traversable wormholes that are created by ultimately human intent. We are like gods to them, actually. These demons do not really have the ability to exist in our reality. But when they come here, they have sensory delight that's much greater than where they usually live. If they can project into one of these astral bodies temporarily, like a ghost in our reality, they can enjoy sensation. They can enjoy the sensation of touch. They enjoy sexuality. And this is all part of what happens when a group of people brings them in. Normally, you can't do it with one or two people. You need a group of people, and it also harnesses the innate telekinetic ability that we all have that most people are not aware of. So there are also cases of Christian seances where you have, like, preachers who actually do these, mediumistic things where you get the ghost of grandma shows up and you can see grandma. And so some of those, some people would say, oh my God, that's all evil. But the point is, there are Christians who have done this and gotten seemingly benevolent apparitions. So this is an ability that apparently we have. It can be used for good or evil. And then again, the ritual magic thing is very, very precise. My insider Bruce told me it's like dialing an IP address or dialing a combination on a safe. You got to do it exactly right or the being won't show up.
Let me ask
So
you this.
one of the things that'll happen is if anybody in the circle starts crying or talking or doing anything other than exactly what you're supposed to do, which is you're not supposed to have any emotional reaction to what you're seeing. You cannot cry, you cannot make a sound, and you have to keep looking. You can't close your eyes, you can't look away. If anybody starts doing that stuff, it can actually break the portal for the demon to come in, and then the demon gets hurt. The demon can actually be very badly injured. And so Jesus was casting out demons in the Bible, and he cast out the demons of these shape-shifting guys that we read about in the book of Mark and Luke. And there's other cases of Jesus casting out demons, and based on the biblical descriptions, these were very visually arresting images. It wasn't just like somebody starts having spasms. It's like you're seeing something over their face as well. So that is one whole part of this. And apparently, again, the Greys, this is an alien technology to summon the lower astrals on any given world. All worlds have them. And they just go from planet to planet trying to set this stuff up with pentagrams and black candles and robes and masks and ritual magic. This is just what they do every planet they come to.
What's your thoughts on tarot card readers or mediums? What's your stance on that? I mean,
well, you got to be really careful. I mean, there's definitely a potential for abuse in all of these categories. I do think that there's a reactivity in Christianity where all forms of this type of, information are seen as evil. I use tarot cards and I was able to get positive results out of them. But again, it really depends on your intent. But the Ouija board, I would say, don't ever mess with the Ouija board. And in fact, once I started to get contact with Archangel Michael, he told me, stop using the cards. I do not want you to use the cards at all. So that was ultimately what I was told once I had this angelic contact.
I mean, Parker Brothers sells the Ouija board. I mean, that's a game for children.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, how many times have you heard stories about people using the Ouija board and either the planchette flies off or the board itself flies off or something in the room comes airborne or it gets all cold? I mean, I've heard personal stories from multiple individuals telling me stuff like this. Or you get a funny smell in the room. That's another one.
Right. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we used to play with that thing. I was like, man, and my dad told me, don't you ever, ever do that again. And I thought it was just fun and games, but kids think that. And then, yeah, man, you can get, I mean, can really bring in some evil entities. And actually, even mediums or psychics or tarot card readers, you don't really know who you're channeling.
Oh, I agree. People always want to give me readings and I tell them no. I only trust my own guidance. And really the most important thing to trust is your own dreams, learning the language of dreams. So again, there's an evil aspect to this. It's very real. We could talk at length about the identity of Satan as an artificial intelligence that blew up what's now the asteroid belt, as we talked about on ninoscorner.tv last week, all that stuff. But we also don't, I know you said you wanted to get this done in like an hour. So we also need to talk about the good guys.
The ruins. Well, let's talk about the good guys, and let's also try to segue into the ruins on other planets in our solar system. So let's talk about the good guys, and then we'll segue into that.
Okay, so the first thing I want to point out as far as the good guys are concerned is that we do need to have a little more room in our ontological conception of reality. Ontology is a study of the nature of the soul in the universe. And typically, ontological study is not based on empirical data. It's only based on raw philosophy, which is following the train of your own thoughts and what do you think about reality based upon your own experience. But I like to add evidence into an ontological argument. So when we go back to the evidence, we see multiple cultures, including the Old Testament and the New Testament and, the Quran, and we have basically the same kind of positive teachings in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu Vedic scriptures talk about being more loving, being more positive. talk about a monotheistic concept of God. Hinduism gave rise to Buddhism. Buddhism has weird humans that show up that can glow and levitate and have incredible abilities. So there's an ongoing catalog of contact in multiple ancient cultures with human-looking, what we could think of as extraterrestrials, but they've probably been here the whole time. And they also exist, most importantly for our audience, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. There are angels of the Lord. There are, beings like, as I've said before, King Nebuchadnezzar had these 3 ETs that looked exactly like human beings. They didn't have wings, but they were called angels. And he didn't believe that they were anything special because they looked like ordinary people. And so King Nebuchadnezzar orders, I think this is in Isaiah, he orders them to be thrown into a fire 7 times hotter than the temperature to roast human flesh. And he kept them in there for an elongated time, and they came out and they were totally unharmed. And then he said, "Blessed be the angels of the Lord." So this is real. And this is, I believe that the Bible and other works are actually contact reports with these human extraterrestrials. So it's sad to me when there's people who believe in the Bible and they believe in Christ and they believe in the divinity of those scriptures, but at the same time, they say that anything else besides us has got to be evil if it comes from somewhere else. That's not really true. This is a long-standing battle between angelic positive ETs and demonic negative ETs that goes back for probably billions of years. Our galaxies had, our Earth has had complex multicellular organismic life, microbes and such, for 3.8 billion years. So this is something that goes back a long time. And you mentioned the ruins in our solar system. I did want to go into that.
Before let's get into that, but
Sure.
but let's let me go back just for a second.
Great.
I'm trying to get a grip on the coming disclosure, okay? And if Aleister, and this is where my mind's going with this, if Aleister Crowley is summoning them, Greys, through ritual magic, and you can summon them through Ouija boards, and mediums can channel them, or tarot card readers can do this or that with them, that tells me there is a demonic presence. So that I understand that. But now,
well, I would just again caution you to say that it's more like 𝗏 gave Aleister Crowley the key to the satanic zoo. And when you start opening up the various zoo cages, you're getting demonic entities that don't really leave a body behind.
Okay, but then now we know the government's coming out and they're getting ready to pull this alien card, which we know is coming.
The government is a very loose term.
This.
There's different factions for sure, but yeah.
Okay, but I'm just saying, I know they're going to try to use this to their advantage,
Right.
Some kind of event, and try to bring in what we would call the Antichrist. Okay, that I'm aware of. I know they're going to try to angle this in the direction they want this to go, and this is when it's going to take personalities like you and others, I believe, to try to set the record straight, because they're going to be looking at people like you and Dr. Greer and other personalities to be the soldiers in the forefront to push forward this agenda. And I'm hoping that people like you are going to be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Oh yeah.
Not so fast. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's why I do shows with you, because I know you're a very smart man, and I know your instincts are, my instincts are right on this, correct?
Well, sure. I think I would agree with the Edgar Cayce readings when he said that the Antichrist is a force that takes hold of individuals and groups and institutions. I think the notion that we're waiting for one evil person to show up who is the Antichrist is a big misdirection of what's already here right now.
It could be a system. It's a system.
It's a system, and it's very vast. And so the concept of the Antichrist is greatly, as people realize, wow, there's a lot of depth to the evil on Earth. It's organized. It's got cells in multiple cities all around the world. There's lots of people participating in this. There's probably 4 million people in this cabal just in America alone. So this is a vast situation, and it's reductive to try to say we're waiting for one Antichrist to show up. It's already here.
The AI.
Well, that too. That's a whole other massive complex discussion about what is that and why did it want to have inoculations that have microchips in them, tiny microchips, that kind of stuff. But we've talked about this a lot, and I think most of the audience is familiar with that content.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go into some new ground here so that we're not just like telling people stuff they've already heard.
Yeah.
But the
Absolutely.
point is, yeah, there is an alien deception going on, and the negative elite would love to have some type of scare event. I think the real, what it seems to be coalescing around, I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be an alien antichrist per se. I would say that if they got what they really wanted, it would be UFOs that they own and control, that they've back engineered, showing up using advanced technology to destroy population centers that they wanted to get rid of. Maybe they're going to zap certain areas of people that they don't like as much. And that would be then the unifying force where, well, now the whole world is threatened and we all have to put lots of money in and pay for them to defend us against this unified alien threat, like Reagan was talking about at the United Nations. That's the one side of it, The other side of it is that we have positive elements of our military that also have these types of back-engineered craft. Anti-gravity is not uncommon at all. Most of the UFOs we're seeing are built by us. And so there's going to be a counterattack where if there, but remember, there is this whole Project Bluebeam thing. A lot of people have talked about that.
Yeah.
We may expect to see these guys try to create holograms that would appear to be real, and that they would appear to try to create some scare event that gets everybody again unifying behind them, giving them money. The best way to make money is to start a war for these people, because if everybody's scared, then they'll take the last of the bread that they have and give it to you to defend them against the monster at the front of the cave. It's very primal, That's what they're hoping for. I don't think it's going to work, though. And we have the Alliance giving us communications regularly. That would be the Alliance is the military positive guys, telling us that they may very well allow this attack to happen or start to happen, but it's going to be blocked immediately. In fact, I think the negative forces have a lot fewer of these types of spaceships that they could use than the positive forces. And so, but in short, if you do see a massive UFO event starting to take place, it's probably a fake out. It's probably holograms. It's probably not real. Don't fall for it. Certainly don't think that the government is going to save you in that scenario.
So let's get to outside our planet. Let's get to ruins that are found that you say exist on other planets. And
Yes, sir.
before we get to that, I would ask you this. Do a lot of them use propulsion systems to get here? Do they use dimensional portals? Is that the main way they get here? What's the main way of travel? Propulsion systems would take forever from A to B. So I would imagine that's not the case, correct?
Yeah, they're not burning fuel.
Right.
There's a much greater expanded physics that extraterrestrials use. And that physics includes the idea of how to create energy that always works, similar to how you put a refrigerator magnet on the refrigerator. You're never worrying that the magnet's going to run out of energy and fall down.
Right.
So if you can think about that concept and then expand that, Tesla was the one who came out with these types of free energy devices. And then JP Morgan said, well, where can I put the meter on this so that I can charge people for this energy? And Tesla said, oh, no, it's all going to be free. Well, F that, we got to make money here,
Correct. Yeah.
So these UFOs are using various types of what are often called over unity devices, where the amount of energy it takes to run them is greater than the energy it takes to, they generate more energy than they take to run.
Right.
And a good way of looking at that would be like the idea of if you could tap gravity like a water wheel tapping a stream. The water wheel just turns. You can put a hydroelectric power plant on that. You can generate energy. That's all you really need to do. So yes, it is a wormhole technology most of the time. They are essentially folding space most of the time. It doesn't require really all that much of an advancement beyond where we are now. In fact, the government has been, the military industrial complex very aggressively blocked people from making these breakthroughs over and over again. They didn't
Could
want
it
this
be
stuff to come out.
through frequencies? Is that how they're doing this?
Yeah, there's a guy, 𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗁, one of the early websites I was always reading was KeelyNet. And he created UFO type device that worked on sound frequencies. And he had a keyboard in front of him, and the way he'd navigate the ship was playing different keys on the keyboard of how these frequencies were generated. So yes, then you can get into Tibetan acoustic levitation. There was a Swiss doctor who traveled to Tibet and saw them with this huge team of people with trumpets and drums in a quarter circle. They were all aimed at the stone that was like, big, huge pyramid-sized block of stone. And they start whamming on the drums and blowing the trumpets. And first they did it it's always in one big blast. First they did it really slowly. They speed it up, and after about 15 minutes, the stone starts wobbling, and then it would slowly rise in a parabolic arc and land on this mountaintop.
This could be how they built the pyramids. I mean, we can go in so many. I know we can go in so many directions, but
there's lots of
I've
places
never
to
seen
go.
this one guy on, and I don't know what happened to him. Maybe you've seen this guy's video on YouTube as well, but he was playing with an online tone moderator or generator on his phone and playing it on the speaker, and he was opening like a wormhole in his room. I don't know what happened to that guy. I don't even know if it was true, but it looked real to me. Okay, because this guy didn't look like he was using any kind of special effects. So is that possible? Could you use a certain hertz and kind of laser it into a certain area and open a wormhole with a certain frequency?
I think most of the time that kind of stuff is going to require some type of rotating magnetic turbine with a very high intensity magnet like neodymium magnets or something like that.
Or like the movie Contact.
Yeah. And then in the case of the Tibetan thing, it's not only the sound frequencies from the trumpets and drums, which were all harmonically proportioned to the size of the stone, it's also the collective shared intention of those human beings in meditation as they're doing this thing. And it's like a group telekinetic effect that levitates the stone. But there are also areas of the earth like the Bermuda Triangle, and there's 12 devil's graveyards around the world, similar to that, where in those places, you're going to get these natural orbs that come from the Earth's core, and they're spherical. Sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're not. They can form tornadoes. That's why tornadoes, you have straw blowing through a plate glass window. You have roosters ending up inside an old whiskey jug, and their head is poking out. How the hell did their body get inside the jug? So tornadoes can cause dematerialization. There's lots of interesting stories like that. But these portals come up from the earth. They typically look like ball lightning, and ball lightning can kill you. There's cases of people getting hit by it and dying. But it also can create anti-gravity, and it also can create time portals. So like in the Bermuda Triangle, you got these portals coming out, and there's stories of people going through them and seeing prehistoric time coming back. And so there are natural events that take place where you can harness these portals, and then things like Stonehenge and pyramids use the natural resonant properties of the stone to attract those balls of energy under human control so that you can deliberately decide when one is going to appear and then use it. But that stuff is very dangerous unless you really know what you're doing. Go ahead, sorry.
The Philadelphia experiment. I mean, didn't they open up a portal with that ship?
Right, that gets back to the USS Eldridge was supposedly where this was done, and they had rotating, again, magnetic turbines that they were originally using to try to get radar invisibility, but then they actually got optical invisibility, which wasn't known. There's a guy named 𝗂𝗵𝗶𝗹, GERRYVASSILATOS, and he disclosed something that I've had confirmed from others, which was at the start of the Philadelphia experiment, came from an anomaly that happened when they were building these giant freighter tankers that you use in the military, with the Navy's got this aircraft carrier. And they had this very high intensity arc welding device where they were welding massive plates of metal together. So you get this massive electrical discharge. And if you talk to Dr. 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗹, the guy who declassified Navy patents on anti-gravity and free energy, he describes something called the superforce, which is that when you have a high enough amount of electrical current in an area, all of a sudden, all the laws of physics start blending together. You get levitation, time portals, all this weird stuff. So when they were doing the arc welding on the aircraft carriers, they would notice that all the power went off in the facility. And then when they turned the lights back on and repair whatever damage was done, they noticed that a lot of tools were missing. So then they got smart. They used high-speed film, and they filmed the arc weld right as they did it. And what they saw was that right where the arc weld would form, there was this actual black hole. And then you'd see hammers and stuff start to rotate end over end and fly into the black hole. And this would happen for a short period of time, and it would suck up some objects before it would actually ruin the power. The lights would go out. And once you cut off the electricity, the black hole would go away. So that was actually the origin of the Philadelphia experiment. It was this weird portal effect that happened from a high-intensity electrical arc discharge.
And it would make sense that thunderstorms, you see a lot of UFOs because they're using it maybe to charge their craft, or using it the charged ions in the
That's right.
atmosphere.
And you're right back to the tornado effect, the rotating wind. A lot of people see weird orbs inside tornadoes. And again, there's all kinds of strange tornado anomalies. I got really deep into that. There's, you know, the bolts on the wheels of your car melt and the wheels fall off the car. There's, you know, people that had all the items in their bathroom end up in the trunk of their car, but the trunk never opened, but they got shampoo bottles in there. There's cases of bricks going through the walls of a house, but the hole that the brick went through is smaller than the brick itself. So it was like the house became stretchy. All kinds of weird stuff where like metal pierces through wood, or wood pierces through metal, or like
Defies our
half
laws
of
of
a
physics.
cow's body gets embedded in the barn that he was in, that kind of stuff.
So it defies our laws of physics completely.
Well, yeah, you go into this gray area, it actually does look like a gray foggy mist, and your ability to get back out of that area is largely dependent on whether you can remember where everything was. So some of the people on the Philadelphia experiment did not remember where the walls of the ship were, and they started walking around in this gray mist. And when they came back to life, they were embedded in the hull. And according to Dr. Pete Peterson, one of my insiders, afterwards you had these anatomical diagrams of liver, spleen, kidneys, lungs, like their body, you could see the body, and then the part of their body that was outside the hull would just fall down as meat. But then you'd see all this stuff in the metal, because it's called blending. That's one of the things the insiders always said, is that you get matter blending. And that also is John Hutchison, right? John Hutchison's Hutchison effect. He would get blending to occur, cold melting of metal, where it's at room temperature, but it gets all soft. This is all part of what happens in these portal areas. The matter will blend together, like wood and metal blending together.
We were going to talk about ruins on other planets, and before we go into that, we were talking. You said something about Stonehenge and the pyramids here. Could those be the stargates that lead to other planets' ruins? Is there other Stonehenge and pyramids on other planets that maybe link our planet to those planets?
Yes, yes, and so there is a very fascinating amount of science that we could talk about with pyramids and how they capture these balls of ball lightning that come from inside the earth. There's also ball lightning that comes from the sun. And when you go into those ball lightnings, you're basically now in the mouth of a wormhole. So the ball lightning is the mouth of a wormhole. It just travels around. You can see it. But if you go inside of it, you might end up going somewhere. And that's the basis, again, of the Bermuda Triangle. And so the pyramids are typically built on vortex points where these balls are already more apt to appear. And then the natural effect of the stone works much like a funnel in capturing those balls, like it's a swirling tornado type of vortex inside the pyramid. The word pyramid means fire in the middle, pyre amid, pyramid. So it captures these balls, and then like in the King's Chamber sarcophagus, that was where you could go through an ascension experience, supposedly, and have your soul go out of body and travel to other star systems. And there's air shafts coming out of the King's Chamber that go to various star systems like Sirius and the Pleiades. So again, getting back to the interstellar ruins, this is a really fascinating subject that details how our solar system has been colonized for a much longer period of time than we think. And there's at least two major phases that I was made aware of. There's one phase that was about 2 billion plus years old, 2.6 billion years old, and that would be glass towers and glass domes and glass pyramids. We call them glass, but they're really transparent aluminum. And then there's a much more recent phase that would be around 700,000 to 500,000 years ago. There's pretty uniform consensus among insiders that the planet that blew up to become the asteroid belt was destroyed 500,000 years ago. So I prepared a few slides for you to show some of these ruins that were identified by multiple insiders as actually being authentic examples of stuff that was out there from these old civilizations.
Perfect. Bring it on.
Okay. So the first thing I want to talk, well, let's go for this slide first. Nino's corner on UFOs on planet ruin. You can't handle the truth, right?
You can't handle the truth. Love it, dude.
So, this is the classic scene, Jack Nicholson, and it's really funny, and I love that. But anyway, what we have is this Brookings Institution, which came out with this report, and it says right here, we'll zoom in on it. It says, mankind is warned to prepare for the discovery of life in space. And this Brookings report is very important because apparently on the inside, they used War of the Worlds in the military industrial complex, and they concluded that we are not ready to be told the truth, that it would destabilize the economy, that people would be freaked out. But when you hear the truth, what you start to hear is, for example, the guy Bruce I told you about said we live in a cosmic junkyard. And what he meant by that is that on the Earth, in various places like Antarctica and underneath the Sahara Desert, there's a bunch of old stuff going back to like 55,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. There's a big civilization here back then. But again, in our solar system, there's two main phases, the 2 billion plus year old phase and the 500,000 year old phase. And a lot of this stuff can be found on the moon.
Dave,
and
let
Richard,
me ask you, how do we know how
Sure.
old stuff is? I mean, how do we really know how old it is? You're saying 500,000, a million. I mean,
well,
off
this is
planet,
the
how can we even tell how old it is?
well, you got to remember that there's a whole elaborate secret space program or programs that we don't know about going back to Germans in World War II. And I heard that from one of my insiders, Henry Deacon, that there was a summit that happened in the Himalayan mountains in 1939 between essentially satanic Draco reptilians and the Nazis. And that it was from that meeting that the Germans started to get the 𝗂𝗏𝗶𝗹 technology, the Bell craft, as it was called, and that this was part of them helping the Draco with their agenda of human trafficking. And the Nazis were able to help them and build their own ships. And that's what repelled Admiral Byrd when he tried to invade Antarctica in the Project High Jump in 1947. That was Nazi flying saucers that had already been to the moon. They'd already been to Mars. And when they got out there, you remember now, this is like 80 years ago. They've been landing astronauts on these satellites. They've been investigating this stuff up close. They use their own types of carbon dating methods. And it's from very elaborate secret studies of which we've never been told much of anything. And the insiders who know this stuff are terrified to speak because you can get tortured to death if you talk about this. But they've used very elaborate things like measuring the number of micrometeorite hits to estimate how old these objects are. And there's a lot that we don't know. There's been evidence that they had to piece together from ruins that they found all over the solar system. But when I show you these pictures, I'm going to be showing you things that our secret programs have actually visited in person. They've sent astronauts out there. They've carbon dated them. They've analyzed how long the micrometeorite hits take to degrade something. And they've concluded again that there's two major periods of when these things appeared. Now, the moon is loaded with this stuff. And so when I was working with Richard Hoagland in the early 2000s, and even in the late 90s, I was starting to talk to him a little bit, but we really became openly working together as of 2004. He had worked with this NASA engineer, Dr. Ken Johnston, who one of his jobs was that he had to destroy an enormous number of boxes full of original Apollo photographs taken from the moon. And he did not feel like this was a good idea. So it was like burning the Mona Lisa to him. So he refused to actually do that. He essentially went renegade and kept all of these boxes in an old, broken down, derelict McDonald's, believe it or not.
Wow.
That's where the boxes were kept. So I got some slides on this. There was a conference where he did this, but for example, this is one of the things that showed up. There was frame 4822, and what you're looking at here are close-ups of images from Apollo frame 4822. Now, what does this look like? This looks like some sort of weird base on the moon. This is where it was taken from. But also, one of the things that was funny was that 4822 was like a code number where you could order frame 4822, you could order a print of it, and NASA might send you different prints. They weren't all the same. There was several different prints of 4822. And so what we see here is there's the Goddard version that was given to Ken Johnson on the left, and then there was a guy named Alex Cook on the right, and he started ordering multiple copies of 4822. And apparently, whoever was the records keeper, nobody had ever told them, hey, you're only supposed to give this 4822, not all the other ones in the file. So this very, very stunning object appears in the original Ken Johnston frame 4822. To look at it again, it looks like it has a landing strip on the top and the bottom. It's clearly got geometry. There appears to be a tower in the middle that you can see. There's a shadow casting off of that to the left. And then notice it also has like grid work. It looks like a cross on the right. So this would be consistent with building a base where you want to have windows. You don't want to make it just one big massive structure. You want to have long.
Now, is that laying horizontally or is that standing upright vertical?
No, this is a horizontal structure. So what you're looking at is a top-down view, like you're flying directly overhead and you're looking down on it from space.
Okay.
And so this is a big base on the surface of the moon. And again, everybody wants windows. So if you notice here, there's like strips that are all parallel to each other. There's like 4 of them. And then there's some going crossways. And so there's a landing area. You could land your ship up at the top. And so that's one of the ones that's really strange.
This would have to be on the back side of the moon, correct? This is not on the front side of the moon.
Well, no, that's what was weird, is that the reason why Ken Johnson was ordered to destroy this stuff is that it's all over the moon. And so NASA would create very lame airbrushings to get rid of this architectural detail. They would actually paint over it with airbrush and try to obscure the detail, or they might splice part of the picture from somewhere else and then lay it over the top and glue it on, and then take a picture of that. And so there was people, according to another whistleblower who was at the Disclosure Project, which again I attended in 2001, Donna Hare, her name was, that's the name she gave herself. She was in contact with somebody whose job was to airbrush out these anomalies from the photos of the moon. So this would be an example of something that's probably more recent. This might be more like one of the 500,000-year-old ones, or what we're looking at here might even be modern. It might be still in use by various extraterrestrial groups. To look at one of the more weird ancient ones, it would be to look at, now this is the, I think this is the moon, I believe it is, or it might be, I'm not sure. I can't remember where I got this from, but anyway, this is the I think it's the moon, it's the underside of the moon in thermal imaging, and now you have multiple strips that you can see the heat signature of, because remember, they're going to heat that up inside. And again, you got long corridors that are geometric and rectilinear at the bottom of the moon is where I believe this is from. So another example of one of these Ken Johnson ones, probably the best one, is this bullet-shaped thing. And so on the left is the airbrushed NASA version that you get from Goddard Space Flight Center. And then on the right is the version that you get from Ken Johnston. And so what we see is that the NASA one that's publicly disclosed on the left has this bullet shape, or it has nothing there. But then the Ken Johnston picture, which is an original, you can forensically prove that it has this weird dome on it. So this dome is now being seen from like a side view. Very fascinating. That would probably be a multi-tiered structure with multiple floors, people living in there, or extraterrestrials, who knows. And this might have been one of the ones that's more ancient, but probably still being used. Then when the Russians sent this probe by called Zond-3, they saw some weird stuff. So for example, this is an image from Zond-3, the first satellite to orbit the moon. And there's this massive tower right there on the surface. That's probably one of the ones that's like 2 billion years old, based on what I've heard. And then if you look in this frame down on the right, don't look at the circle on the left. You want to look way down on the far right. When you zoom in on it up close, you see
Oh
one of
yeah.
these glass domes. It's incredible.
Oh
And so
wow.
that's, again, all smashed out. It's old, it's
Wow.
ancient, it's probably 2 billion. Yeah, isn't that incredible, dude? Look at
Yeah,
that
that's
thing.
insane.
The roof is
Wow.
collapsed in, it's been smashed for a bunch of times, but originally these were used to pressurize and have an atmosphere inside. People are living in there in a civilization where they got trees and grass and water and animals, and they build their houses and they've got their ships that they use. And so that's a fully Edenic paradise on an otherwise inhabitable moon. If you have,
There's vegetation that grows on the moon, correct? I've heard that over and over again. Is that
there's a
true?
little bit, yeah, but not very much and not much atmosphere. And so if you do this, you can have an atmosphere, you can breathe air. But here's another thing I want to show you, dude. Check this out. The original Apollo 17 mission, it never got to happen. And they had this particular individual, I'll remember his name in a second. I think it was Schmidt. Yeah, it was Schmidt. He was not a Mason. He was not in the military. He was a civilian who they brought in to go to the moon. But apparently they gave him some briefings because they allowed him to design his version of what the moon patch would be that the astronauts wear on their uniform. You know, they always have a patch. So check out the patch that this guy Schmidt drew for the Apollo 17 moon mission. Why in the hell would he draw this? This is the patch, okay?
Oh wow. Wow, Stonehenge.
So he's got Stonehenge, and then he's got the moon, and there's this weird stuff going on with this cross
Oh,
pattern between that, and it's all blue. And there's other patches he did, which I don't have in these particular slides. But the point was, he was drawing what appeared to be Stonehenge type stuff on the moon. And that's what they briefed him on, and that's what he was prepared to go see. So then the question is, well, did they even land on the moon at all? And that keeps coming up. And the answer is that they did, but they also created fake moon landing sets that were able to be used in case the astronauts died and never made it.
So okay, so they did both. They
Right.
went, but they also had a backup plan just in case they didn't win because they were in a race with Russia to get there, right, against the cosmonauts. So they wanted to make it, they wanted to make sure there was footage of them landing on the moon regardless, correct?
Right. But another part that people usually don't remember or that they don't know about is that you also have these glass towers, these glass domes, these more modern bases. And part of what was going on is that the astronauts were landing near these, and they wanted to try to get near enough to take pictures, and then they did not want anybody to know about that. So that's another reason why, for certain moon missions, you might want to use the fake photographs so that you don't have to release the real ones where you're right next to some big, massive structure.
So why haven't we been back? I was talking to Peter Navarro. Yeah, I just had him on my program. I haven't
Yeah.
aired it, but he
Yeah,
was
he's
talking
great.
about how, yeah, he was talking about how now we're in a race with China, and they're estimated to land by, I can't remember what he said, 2028, 2030, something around that time frame, 2035, I don't know. But well, if we've already been there, what's the problem with getting back with today's technology? I don't understand that. Or has the secret space program been going there constantly? And just the commercial end of this, NASA really never went and just showed us on the moon landing on Hollywood scene, a Hollywood set, or a set in New Mexico, wherever the hell they filmed this. I mean, why haven't we been back?
Well, I'm going to give you another piece of disclosure that's brand new, and that is 𝗏𝗏. This is something I only got briefed about, I don't know, like less than a year ago. And I'd heard about something that was some type of thin foil material that was an advanced alloy, but I'd never heard it called 𝗏𝗏. But it turns out that so this is why people try to debunk the moon landings, because, well, if you try to go out there and you put a human being in there, you're just going to get fried like a microwave oven.
The Van Allen bill.
Right.
Comes to my mind.
And solar radiation. So the part that people don't know is that part of why these very flimsy Apollo capsules worked is that there was secret sauce called 𝗲𝗏. They made the 𝗲𝗏 into a foil. They got this from, I guess, extraterrestrials that contacted the 𝗷𝗏 Society, which was one of these German societies. And so this is a very thin metal that is a 100% radiation shield and protects you when you're out in space. And so you need the 𝗲𝗏 to be able to send men or women to the moon. And without that, they're going to get cooked. So that was one of the secrets
we had
of why it
alien
happened.
technology in the 1960s being used on this on the craft.
𝗲𝗏, yeah.
Wow. Yep. Okay. All right.
So another, probably the best example of lunar architecture that did leak out into the public is the so-called Blair cuspids. And this is a photograph that became very hard to get after a while. And what we're seeing here is a series of towers. Look at the one on the top in the middle. And you'll notice there's a big, long shadow that's cast, almost like you were looking at the shadow of the Washington Monument, looking at it straight down. And then you also see there's some square craters below this area. It's a little harder to make out in this image, but there's actually multiple towers here. And so this was a Russian concept of those towers in their Technika Molodzevi or Technology for Use magazine.
Obelisks.
Yeah, they look like obelisks.
Yeah.
And so this is another one of the ones that Richard found that might be real, which was one of the pictures that they, you know, where they took of an Apollo astronaut, and maybe there's a tower in the background, and they thought that they could get away with this shot. But if you look very closely on his visor, you can see the top of the tower is glowing with light. I'm not really sure if I believe this one. Or what's that?
Can you zoom in on that? Or
well, that's what you're doing is you're looking at his helmet in the bottom. You look at the picture in the bottom left, then you're looking at him on the right. And then if you look at the top left, that's the up close view of what's in his visor. And then it's been artificially enhanced, and that's where you see this strange object. Here's another one that is very, very interesting. This is a photograph of Edgar Mitchell, and there was different versions of it. And if you crank up the contrast on the background, it appears maybe that he was in front of some type of glass tower, because you look at especially the one in the bottom right, you can see what looks like reflective bars of glass. Now, other people have speculated that that might be these glass beads that were used by people like Stanley Kubrick, that this was one of the sets, that it was from Earth. So there's a debate as to what this is, but either way, when you crank up the contrast and you use the curves function in Photoshop, there's stuff in there that really doesn't belong. And if you look at the top right one, you can clearly see it looks geometric.
yes,
This is another one from the Ken Johnston slides. It looks like some sort of strange antenna. Very, very strange thing on the surface of the moon. And then here's another one of those old 2 billion-year-old glass shard photographs where, again, NASA probably didn't want you to know about this. It's almost invisible to the naked eye, but in some of the final Apollo photos, you can crank up the contrast and you see, and I was told this one is real, that these are broken shards of ancient glass on the moon.
Incredible.
Very fascinating.
Fascinating.
Now here's another one that Richard is seeing all kinds of stuff. If you look in the gray area, you crank it up, there's what looks like it might be glass there because there's weird contrast in the background that shouldn't be there. But the strangest thing is this bar that looks like something fell across the mountaintop there. And it looks like maybe it's some type of glass beam. Like maybe there was a bunch of these glass type of bars that were used. It's pretty freaking amazing that shows up in the Ken Johnston photo.
Can I look at that one more time? It looks like a telephone wire.
It really does.
Yeah.
And so then this is another shot from the moon that might be a former building that got blown out. And so there's a lot of interesting, there's a lot of interesting stuff like this that you can go visit. And once we get our own spaceships, we'll be able to do this. But now the grand finale for the end of our show is this incredible idea that the moon itself has a superstructure inside of it. And it's actually, you can live inside the moon in these underground bases. And the whole entire moon has a superstructure built inside of it that's actually a gigantic cube that fits in the whole width of the moon itself. and this may be true. You can actually see the cube in these photographs that they only released in 2014
Well,
in the Nature
haven't
Science
they
Journal.
done tests on the moon where they can tell that it rings like a bell, like it's hollow inside?
That's right, and that's a very good thing to remember. Yeah, there were space capsules that hit the moon, and then they're like, wait a minute, it's way more hollow than it should be. The way that this space capsule is ringing, Soviets and Americans both found that. That's absolutely true. But we don't really, most people don't know what might be inside the moon. But we had another soft disclosure in 2014. This is going to blow your mind, dude. Check this out. This was in Nature Science Journal, and it says, okay, the moon's largest plain is not an impact crater. Gravity data suggests flats of volcanic basalt formed from tectonic effects. Well, it's geometric. So look at this. When you look at the picture on this article and then you look at the one on the right, this is tilting the moon just slightly different from how we see it on Earth. You realize, my God, these Cs or mares as they're called, the outline of the man on the moon image is a big square, as you can see on the right. And they even acknowledge this in space.com. It says strikingly geometric shape hidden on the moon's surface. So the red lines that you see in this image show that there is this square, and it's a perfect side of a cube. It's if you built 6 of these and you built them in the shape of a cube, they perfectly fit in the moon. And so then they showed us this, which is the newly discovered rectangular structure, right? This is
That's
a different
odd.
angle than we see it from the Earth, but it is a freaking square. And all of those darker areas called Cs or mares are inside the square. And then this is from the Nature Science Journal as well, where they're showing, so that's what it was. The thing I showed you before was Saturn's moon Enceladus, where it had the multiple layers of geometry at the South Pole. But the one in the middle is the square on the moon. And then here's another example of it where it's called the 𝗂𝗧𝗰𝗶𝗹 rifts. So that is just really insane.
So, Dave,
Because
I wonder, is this moon even real? I mean, is it a ship? Could it be some kind of alien ship that came into our solar system and parked there? Because I mean, I've heard
that's
this
what,
theory.
yeah, I
What?
mean, that every insider who's real who I ever spoke to told me that the moon started out as an organic object. It actually is, a natural moon. But the biggest disclosure that I got on it was that there was some very advanced extraterrestrial technology where they have a little object the size of a baseball, and it is totally loaded with self-replicating nanites. And they send this little baseball back in time, maybe a couple billion years. They have these extraterrestrials have the ability to do this. It lands on the moon. The nanites pop out of the baseball. They start self-replicating, and they build larger and larger machines as they keep growing. And they eat the minerals and the metals that are there in the moon's surface. And they build this base so that at the time that you sent the ball out, now all of a sudden the moon is filled with the custom-made, robotically built underground bases that you wanted to have. And it took maybe 1 billion years to make it with these little nanites, but now it's ready for you in real time. That's what I was
That's
told. It sounds crazy,
insane, dude.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Dude, I mean, that would just show you that their technology is so far superior, so advanced that they can send nanonites back 1 billion years to build a base for them now.
Right.
That's crazy. I mean,
and apparently as long as you don't change the way the surface of the moon looks too much, I mean, yeah, you got a big square. That's one of the artifacts of this build out apparently, but like otherwise it looks normal. And you can make them to order this way, and it's not even expensive. The technology is all computerized and has a type of AI that it
all
uses.
hidden from us. This is all well hidden
Yeah,
from us.
the moon is a
And
used car that can't drive around anymore. It did its final trip when it made it out here. And this is one of the things that the various inside communities, they don't really know, when did the moon get here? There's some speculation that human extraterrestrials parked it here 65 million years ago, and that's how they killed off an indigenous reptilian humanoid race that became sentient, human-like on Earth out of the dinosaurs. and that by flying this portable moon into Earth's orbit, now we have seasons, and now the Earth is no longer habitable for reptilian life. It became a mammalian planet. And so this might have been the result of a war, because again, some of the parts of the moon have 10,000 floors deep, and it's all built to transport the population of an entire planet from one solar system to another. It's like Noah's Ark. It's got all the animals, all the plants. There's multiple decks inside the moon that were built for oceans. So you've got whales, you've got manatees, you've got dolphins, you got ocean water in those decks. This is all custom built this way. You got all the planet's population of humans, and you drive through space, you park in a new solar system, you park it around a planet, you turn the planet into a mammalian planet with seasons, and then you can then teleport into the future and colonize the planet once it's had time to adjust. This is all stuff I've heard from the inside.
Dave. I've got to do more shows with you, man. I love this stuff, man. You really just blow my mind, dude. And I know my audience appreciates you too. One last question. Would that be maybe why the reptilians have gone underground, or they always been underground?
Yeah, let me show you this, since you just mentioned underground. This is the one last thing I want to show you, and that's the asteroid 𝗬𝗧. And these are square craters, which would represent areas that were built out underneath the surface of the moon, or in this case, an asteroid, and then they get hit by a bunch of meteors, and the roof collapses in. But originally, these were big square rooms, and NASA themselves is calling it square craters. But again, this thing on the moon, this is the square I want to show you, the 𝗏𝗡 rifts. I mean, that's a cube inside the moon. I did all the geometry. It perfectly fits. So the superstructure inside the moon may actually look something like this. This is a crop circle, giving you the idea that there's a cube in there. The sphere inside the thing might not be.
They're telling us.
Yeah, they're telling us the truth. They're telling us, hey, look, your moon is a big, giant, hollow object, and it's all built out to have these civilizations live inside. So this is a very fascinating subject, and that's why, again, don't just get confused into thinking that if we get disclosure that, oh, it's the Antichrist and they're going to try to take over the planet. No, the real disclosure that we're going to get is going to include things like I'm sharing with you now. The moon is artificial.
But hold on, it's not going to come from the government. I don't think.
No, I think there is a part of the military that wants us to have the truth. They want full disclosure. And you're going to learn about the 2 billion-year-old glass towers and glass domes, like I showed you from Zond 3. You're going to learn about the more recent stuff that I showed you in the Ken Johnston images, like the 𝗏𝗏𝗶𝗶s and the little bullet thing, and that weird base that looks like, airport or something. This is all stuff that's going to come out. There's a bunch of ETs here. And again, 57 varieties, according to Sergeant Clifford Stone. Most of them are good. And most of them are actually more human than the Greys. So it's going to be mind-blowing because, again, most of the ETs visiting us are actually very positive. You could even call them ascended beings. They have their own type of cosmic Christianity. They believe in a cosmic galactic Christ that Jesus was the embodiment of. Pete Peterson met with supposedly ETs in Antarctica, telling him that they were here to see the galactic mind embody in a human. That doesn't usually happen, but it did here, and they were very excited about it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to learn when disclosure comes out. I cannot wait. I cannot wait until this stuff becomes public, man. And it's
I'm blown away.
I
just you're absolutely one of my top favorite guests now, and
thank you.
yeah, I mean, it's just epic. I mean, I would imagine, like, if I was an extraterrestrial and I was visiting Earth, I would kind of look at it like going to see monkeys at a zoo. Okay, I'd be like, wow, they're still doing that. That's incredible. You know what I mean? Like,
well, but the good ones actually do have compassion for us, and they're making sure that we get through this without being destroyed. That's why you see UFOs over nuclear missile installations. They power it down, and the missiles no longer are radioactive. I mean, that's very commonly reported. So they are protecting us and making sure we don't nuke the planet. And I think we're going to be fine.
Folks, give me your thoughts down below. Put your comment down below. I'm gonna have. Hopefully, we could do another episode. Are you cool with that? I would love to.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna. This might be minorly edited for YouTube. There's just some words we might have used, but this is going to YouTube. So, I gotta say, Dave, thank you so much for joining me. It was epic. I've learned a lot. So,
I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Nino.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. All right, folks, leave a comment down below and share, like, and hit the notification buttons. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Oh, where do people find you? They shouldn't. They should know.
Oh,
where to
well, every Sunday on YouTube /𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏, I do a live stream that runs from noon Mountain Time to about 4 p.m. It's 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. That's every Sunday at 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏 on YouTube. And if you want to order my products, that would be at 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏.com, where I have some very fascinating stuff there, the Archangel Michael books, as I've said before, on other shows we've done. Thank you for asking, Nino.
You talk about all this on your channel, correct? I mean, this is nothing new.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And we're getting a lot of, I mean, I'm doing a live stream. We're getting sometimes as many as 5,000 or 6,000 people consistently watching live through the whole thing, which is really amazing. And then they're ending up getting an average of like 100,000+ views. So people really love it. And because I'm working on aerospace now and I'm about to be funded through that, I'm now sharing all my best stuff that I used to charge people a lot of money to hear. Now I'm releasing most of that information for free. I'm just kind of going through and telling a story week after week on Sunday. So it's very fascinating. It's all free now on YouTube. So please go to 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏. Thank you for asking me.
And I was just gonna say your domain name, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏, dude. That's a banger. I don't know how you got that.
Well, I got
cool.
lucky, and
Yeah,
my
you did.
original
That's a huge...
archived website that I'm going to start posting to again pretty soon is divinecosmos.com, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏.com. So I also recommend checking that out.
But I can put 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏 down there in the bottom, and people can just click on that, and they'll
That's
be
right.
set.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Dave. Thank you so much. God bless you, sir.